In this Sports Psych Basics video, we want to talk about responsibilities of coaches and 6 types of practice schedules. What are the basic responsibilities of all teachers? They need to be there. They need to provide instruction and practice and make corrections. And let's understand, what are the 3 basic responsibilities of all teachers? Any good coach is a teacher. So these are the 3 basic responsibilities of all coaches. They need to be there, provide instruction and practice, and make corrections. Making corrections is the hardest part of coaching. Let's take a look at the second thing here. A coach or a teacher needs to provide instruction and practice. And instruction simply is how you deliver the material. Okay? Whatever the material is that day, pick and roll, a jump shot, how to block. And practice is how you engage the learner or the athlete in the material. What are you doing to provide them some experience to get better? So there's 2 types of practice we want to talk about right off the bat. Whole practice and part practice. Okay, whole practice is when you play the game, when you scrimmage. Part practice is when you practice parts of the game separately. So to help us understand whole and part practice and maybe give us an illustration, we're going to use the Tower of Hanoi. It's a pretty simple puzzle. And what you have is you have some graduated discs and 3 pegs, and your goal is to move them one at a time, only putting a little one on top of a big one, and see if you can move the whole stack to peg number 3. And so it might look something like this, where the person goes through and tries to figure out how to move them to number 3. Now, since we have the puzzle here, you could have them do all 6. All 6 would be whole practice, or 7 or 8. But since they would be struggling with it, you might take the first 3 off and have them do part practice. Let's see if they can move 3 there and give them an opportunity to put a little one on a big one and move them over to number 3. If they're successful, you might add the 4th one in part practice and then provide part practice with 4 discs, maybe 5, and then work your way up to the whole of 6. So that's whole practice and part practice using the Tower of Hanoi as an example. Now, in the sports world, whole practice would be scrimmaging or playing the game. You need to scrimmage, and scrimmaging is good for learning. Part practice, on the other hand, allows the athlete to get better at different parts of the game, and it's better for performance. There's a rule here in using whole and part practice, and the rule is that the sum of the parts is never equal to the sum of the whole. The athletes need to engage in the game. Okay? 2 other practice schedules we want to take a look at today. One's called constant practice. The other one's called variable practice. Let's define these real quick. Constant practice is when you do the same skill the same way every trial. So if I'm talking about shooting in basketball, I would pick a spot on the floor, and maybe the wing spot, and I would shoot from the wing, okay, on the floor every trial. Variable practice is when you do the same skill a different way every trial. So if we're talking about basketball again, it would be shooting, and I would be shooting on the wing, on the baseline, in the lane, learning a little bit of force and distance. Let's use the tower and see if we can't illustrate this constant and variable practice again. Constant practice would be seeing if they could move the discs from peg 1 to peg 3. And if they get successful, then you might have them do maybe 5 trials to see if they could do it in a very consistent basis from peg 1 to peg 3. Okay, that would be constant practice. Okay, you could even do constant practice with 4 discs and ask them to move it from peg 1 to peg 3 and provide them 5, 6, 7 trials to see if they could be successful at moving 4 discs. Okay, you could then do 5. Variable practice, on the other hand, would be a subtle change. Something would change. So let's move to 3 discs again And let's move the discs to number 3, and you ask them to move them to number 2. Now understand, this requires the athlete to think. Okay, they have to process the cues, move forward, and see if they can succeed in the task. And lo and behold, they succeed. So on the next trial, since they succeeded, we got a thumbs up, let's ask them to move them from number 2 back to number 3 and see if they can succeed again. Again, you're changing something and making them think. In our basketball illustration, you would be changing spots on the floor, changing force and distance. In the tower, you could do 3 discs, 4 discs, change the point where you start, change the ending point. There's a variety of ways to involve variable practice. Variable practice makes the learner think. Constant practice is very good for a new learner in the cognitive stage of learning. It's good for performance. Variable practice is very good for a beginning learner in the practice stage of learning. They know the name of it, they know what it looks like, and you want to make them think a little bit between each trial. Okay? Variable practice is good for learning. The last 2 practice schedules we want to talk about is blocked practice and random practice. Let's define these 2 terms real quick. Blocked practice is when you do the same skill on every trial. Random practice is when you do a different skill on every trial. Okay? So random practice could be constant or could be variable, but you're doing the same skill. Okay? Shooting a basketball, swinging a baseball bat. Random practice is doing a different skill on every trial. Okay? Blocked practice is good for new learners. Cognitive stage and practice stage of learning. It's good for performance. It allows the new learner to gain some confidence in their ability to do some things. Random practice is poor for performance. It's really hard mentally on new learners, but it is playing the game, and random practice is very good for learning. Okay? So it takes a little longer to perform better, but it's better for learning. You should use a combination of both. This involves drills. Random practice could be scrimmaging, could be the whole. Block practice could be parts. We start learning about practice schedules in these 6 types that you could use. I hope these 6 schedules, whole part, constant, variable, blocked, and random, will help you have some logic to your practice sessions. You should never practice because that's the way you did it. It was good enough for you. It should be good enough for them.